it from most other castles. But a lot of people who are not professionals read military history very seriously and very reflectively. And they form opinions based on what they read. This assumes an altogether different and greater importance when we recollect that the books and the websites which they consult represent almost the only contact that most people will ever have with the military or with the military past. In almost all Western states, the connection between citizenship and soldiering has been severed. The United States no longer has conscription, except in principle. In Germany there is conscription, but you are offered the alternative of doing civilian service, and 70% of people take it. Elsewhere, and notably in France, conscription has been abolished. What people read, and what we and others write about it, therefore, help to form what people think, and most particularly influence their reaction to media reporting of current conflicts. And that's particularly important, because most people, we rely, for the most part, on TV reporting. That's where we get our information from. But TV reporting is reporting of pictures, essentially. Television likes what is photogenic, not necessarily what is interesting or what is important, or and is little concerned with the reality beyond the photograph. I've had a lot of experience in television one way or another, and the thing that they always say to you first is, will it look good? Will it look good on TV? And that's what matters when it comes to the news. So what is pumped out in Britain, in Europe, and in the United States on the news is designed, whether they would admit it or not, to look photogenic rather than to be informative, so that people inform the pictures that they receive with their knowledge. And to a very considerable extent, their knowledge will be based on what military historians have written about the past, because it is immensely popular. What people read is, of course, preeminently modern, and it finds two focuses. The first and the major one that I'm going to talk about quite a lot is the Second World War. In the United States, there is a whole major industry devoted to the Civil War, of course. But in the end, I think World War II influences people much more substantially. And we medieval military historians are very conscious that we're a kind of handloom weaver's cottage industry compared with the gigantic number of typewriters and computers producing stuff on World War II. There are, I think, some considerable problems about the focus on modern warfare, and especially on the history of World War II. It may seem an odd thing to say about such an appalling event, an event which I can very slightly, at my advanced age, remember myself. But World War II has become something of a comfort blanket. It's endlessly written about, and filmed from it is, of course, the mainstay of the Hitler Channel, as the History Channel is sometimes called. The general message writings and films give is that we, usually meaning the US and Britain, and sometimes other allies are mentioned, we won. Our victory in 1945 is seen as the foundation of the peace which we in Europe and the United States, but not everybody, but we believe we have enjoyed since 1945. The effect of endless reiteration is rather like that of looking only in the mirror on the wall. After a while, we are bound to think we are the most beautiful of them all. We won is a very comforting mantra, and a good deal of the material published on the Second World War is really very self-congratulatory in tone. Yet in all modern accounts of World War II, there is a paradox. while the emphasis may be on the D-Day landings, the northwestern European campaign, and in Britain, sometimes the Desert War, more serious recent writers have recognized that in the German war, the basis of victory was the fighting on the Eastern Front. This is a subject which popular works tend to miss out. Max Hastings, who is a very fine English historian, has written extensively about the Second World War, and he argues he's gone to a lot of trouble to set out the truths about the Eastern Front. And he points out with great clarity, and he's done it several times, and he's not alone, that the men of the totalitarian states, Germany and the Soviet Union, fought harder and more skillfully than those of the democracies. And he suggests quite seriously that only one such fanaticism could have defeated another. Yet at the same time, he praises Western soldiers for having preserved what he calls the civilized values. But of course, the implication, which he never spells out, is that if they had preserved those civilized virtues any harder, they might well have lost the war. And this brings me to the issue which worries me the most, what I call the Saving Private Ryan effect, the sanctification of the World War II experience. World War II has become the just war, the war fought for all the right reasons in which good triumphed over evil. And this view is intensified because in Europe and the United States, people see it, quite falsely, in my opinion, as ushering in a long period of peace and unparalleled prosperity. The wars assumed something of the character of an extended Western, a simple interplay of white hats and black hats, in which the former triumphed despite many setbacks. A Jimmy Stewart movie, I think, rather than a John Wayne one. A recent book by a very distinguished historian on the Second World War, a general history of the Second World War, is called Moral Combat. And its whole theme is the moral superiority of the Western alliance. This moral complexity of war, however, not to say ambiguity of the actual event, has become somewhat lost in a wave of feel-goodism. And all World War II's horrors are somewhat mitigated by this and the very false perception of a resulting long peace. And this has become the pattern, the norm to which all war should conform. Yet in any realistic perception, World War II was a very unusual event. The only precedent for destructiveness on this scale which I can find lies in the dynastic conflicts within China. These are often portrayed in very peculiar terms. One dynasty loses the mandate of heaven, another mysteriously ascends to it. In fact, they were the occasions of particularly bloody warfare. The Sui census of 609 AD recorded nearly 9 million households in China and 46 million individuals. The Tang census of 640 AD reported 2 million households, almost 3 million, and a personal population of 12 million individuals. That's destruction that approaches the World War II scale. Undoubtedly, it was the result not just of killings. Many peasants fled to the south, and others were withdrawn by predatory lords who subjugated them. But the raw figures show enormous disruption and destruction. The fact is that war, leaving aside such ancient statistics, war rarely is, on the present Saving Private Ryan model, black and white.